It's time for the 32081 Scoreboard Show. Let's recap the latest weekly scores and highlights from around the county.
And welcome to a special edition of the 32081 Scoreboard Show. As some of you may have heard, there was a recent investigation of Coach Garth over with the Nease Panthers football program. And while I've been asked about the status of the investigation due to my relationship both with Nease High School as well as with Coach Garth, I have purposely remained at a distance. However, with the new information being reported, I have decided that this story needs to be covered as it can have lasting implications for coaches, student athletes, and parents. To talk about this subject, I have invited a friend of the show. You have heard him before on here, Mike Lischio from WNZF Sports in Flagler County on 94.9 FM, and he does a fantastic job. Mike, thanks for coming on and talking to me about this subject today.
I appreciate it, Todd. Looking forward to it. Always good to get back in touch with you.
We always find stuff to talk about, man, right? The most interesting topics. So,
absolutely.
Listen, so like I said, I've stayed at a distance for here, one, because of my relationship with Nease, having students there, as well as my son does train with Coach Garth. And when this investigation came up, it really raised a lot of questions for me because it seemed like it was a very quick pull. So one of the things for people that don't know is that there was some accusations concerning recruiting or improper communication with a student athlete at another school. And all of a sudden you hear he's suspended for 6 weeks. And this is also the county and FOSHA getting involved here. Suspended for 6 weeks, fined like $5,000. The school's on academic, or not academic probation, but, probation for a year, and they're fined. And I'm sitting here looking at this going, what in the world? This is crazy, right? Because the mom comes out and says, we had no relationship or whatever. And here's where I really want to start talking about. Now you fast forward to recently, and all of a sudden the fines are cut back, which I want to talk about that. The suspension is cut back, and then all of a sudden we find out that the father came out and said, hey, no, I did talk to Garth. So my thing is here, before I get into what I think FOSHA's kind of created a problem with some of the rules and the easy transfer thing here, Mike, is that I'm just amazed that at this kind of a level, with a coach that gives so much to the players and the stuff that I know he does for them, that they were so quick to pull the trigger and say, you're suspended, you're fine. And it really seems like they kind of botched the investigation here, not getting all the facts in play here. And now he's missed, 4 or 5 games already. I mean, does this seem a little odd to you?
It should seem a little odd, but given the subject of being the FHSAA, it really isn't. It just, in this situation, it seems like there was no follow-up investigation. It was something was reported, and they made a decision to go by what was reported, whether it was accurate or not. You talk about a $5,000 fine, and Coach Garth is a volunteer, so he's not subject to fines. But even if he was, I'm not privy to know exactly what his coaching stipend would be if he was not a volunteer. But I can tell you that $5,000 is more of a stipend, was more than any head coach in the state of Florida is getting. So I would assume it's significantly less. So that was a little outlandish to have such a severe fine, and then 6-game suspension. You're basically cutting Nease off at the knees, and then it turns out, they didn't even have their facts straight.
Yeah, and it seems like to me that they've kind of opened the door saying, hey, if you want to get a coach suspended, just make an accusation. I mean, that's really what it seems like to me, that they were so quick on this one. And then the other thing and this is the other thing I want to talk about before I get, and I'm glad you mentioned the fine, because I thought the $5,000, I'm like, first of all, that's crazy. And then the second thing, with all the reports coming out about how they're trying to retain coaches and how they're trying to get more pay for coaches, and then you're going to hit a $5,000 fine to someone and you don't really know their status, that's kind of, I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm thinking about coach, I'm going, not sure if I even want to get involved in this, because here's the thing. And this is my take, and I wanted also your opinion on this, is that FOSHA's made it so easy for kids to transfer. I know of 2 right off the top of my head that have transferred to other programs, and they're playing. One, I think in one case was Florida Virtual. The other went to the other county to move. I've heard stories and known it firsthand about subletting apartments and everything. So what I'm getting at is that you see all these transfers happening, and you mean to tell me that these kids are transferring without talking to coaches or representatives from these teams, and they're putting this investment, pulling their kids out to where they don't know they're going to go play, and they're just going to show them and say, hey, I just decided to make this change. We're here to play football. So if FOSHA's made it easy to transfer, to another school to play. What I don't understand is, do they really think that parents are going to not talk to people to get information prior to making such a big move for their child?
It kind of feels like, I will say this, and I rarely defend them, but I will a little bit in this respect, that legislation has cut them off, has handcuffed them really in a lot of ways with school choice and things like that, you have the right to transfer to another school. So it'd be hard for the FHSAA to deny an athlete who could otherwise transfer for any reason now, because we have the school choice legislation that we have.
Right.
But it's almost their approach to it is, we're just going to cover our eyes and hope nobody says anything. That seems to be, because I can tell you, I know of athletes who are in that situation as well here in St. Johns County. And, I cover Flagler and Volusia County as well. And I can tell you, in Volusia County, it's been like that because Volusia County didn't have very strict transfer rules. It's been like that for well over a decade in Volusia County, where I've called games for kids at 4 different schools in 4 years. I mean, there's a kid right now who's been at both Nease and Matanzas. So, the transfer thing it's wild. I don't like it, but the FHSAA has not even tried to put policy in place. But I think it's because they fear retribution from the legislature, like they've had in the past when they try to be proactive on things. So whether it's the legislature didn't like the way they approached trying to identify the proper sex of athletes, or whether they didn't like the approach to COVID. So anytime they've run awry of the legislature has come down on them pretty swiftly and sharply. So I think that's part of the reason that they are so hesitant to do anything. But, you also can't just hide under the desk and hope nothing happens either.
Now, could this have lasting implications? Because when I was thinking about this, and I'm going, here's Coach Garth, who is, like I said, helped out kids. He's run good training programs. I have a child that has been involved with his training programs and gotten a lot out of it. And I started thinking about this, that when you start talking about the improper talk to and the vagueness of the rules, I started thinking there's other sports out there besides football. We're talking about football right now, but you got to look at other sports out there that use facilities at high schools across the state. And I'm talking baseball, lacrosse, softball. I mean, you go on. And in a lot of cases, you have where coaches are using these facilities for, say, travel baseball, lacrosse, flag football, whatever. And you got to wonder, at what point is FASA going to come back, or anyone going to say, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. You're doing a travel program. You're using a high school facility. You're coaching at the high school facility. Could that also be improper conduct? See, that's where I'm trying to have a hard time with this, Mike, is where are they drawing the line on this, or are they not? Or are they, like you said, just closing their eyes and waiting for someone to bring something to their attention?
So, like, my son plays lacrosse, and a lot of the club teams in lacrosse in his league are just made up entirely of a school and their coaching staff. Now, the schools in question, I know my son's team is not using any facilities, and I think a couple of the other teams that I'm aware of that are completely consistent, as far as I know, they're not using school facilities. But at the same time, we're just putting a different name on the jersey, and, we're practicing. We're playing games. So, it's like, technically, because it's not with the school, it's not a violation, but at the same time, it's one of those spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. The spirit of the law, or in this case, the rule, would say that if you have a team entirely consistent of kids from one school, and they're coached by the staff of the head coach of the school and the staff of the school, that that would tell me that this is off-season programs, outside of the guidelines. But at the same time, it's just as simple as that. You just put a different jersey on and you're out of it. So there's certainly things they can clean up, and not just in football, but in other sports as well. I know the same thing with soccer. There's the same thing with a lot of the soccer clubs down through the area. So, and I'm not saying it's just specific to one school. It's most schools are doing it because, it's by the rule, it's allowed. But, when you look at it from a 10,000-foot view, it's certainly not what was intended.
Yeah, and I guess real quick, and my last thought on this is kind of back to what I said at the beginning of the show regarding specifics around Coach Garth, is what worries me as a parent and someone that supports the coaches and what they do. My concern is the fact is that what they found out after the fact. I mean, they said they conducted an investigation, but I have a problem thinking that was a full investigation after you suspended him, fined him, and then find out that the father had contact with him and said, no, wait a minute, hold on, this is it. And then on top of that, once they find that, they overrule it, there's a series of other hurdles I have to go on to reinstate him. And again, I have not spoken to him on purpose, and I can say that because it's 100% true, because I want to stay independent of this. But Mike, I also think out of all of this is that the way the investigation was handled, if you will call it that, could have been done a lot better, in my opinion, on the multiple levels where it was done.
Absolutely. In this case, it's as simple as talking to both parents instead of just one. I mean, how hard is that? It never occurs is that in this case, the student, his parents are separated, that, okay, well, he spends time with one parent and then spends time with the other parent. Did the other parent know? Maybe dad knew, maybe mom knew. It didn't even cross their mind. And, we talked about this a little bit. Florida is having such a hard time retaining coaches. And, when you put obstacles like this where a coach is, trying to do the right thing and trying to help make a difference in these kids' lives and not failing to go to Georgia or Alabama or Texas where they can make significantly more money, and then you're punishing them in such an egregious way, like it's very disappointing. And it just shows that now the FHSAA has no control of the coach pay. That
right, absolutely.
You're not helping. You're not helping. That's what I would say about that. Is they're not helping the situation at all.
No, and I think to your point, you're exactly right. And like I said earlier, I think you're putting a big question mark in people's heads. Like if you're thinking about volunteering, you're thinking about doing this, $5,000 is no joke, man. I couldn't just whip out a check for $5,000 if I was, helping out of school and just happened to have this happen. I couldn't do that. So in closing, Mike, I think probably the biggest thing I hope for here is that if this was to happen in the future, that maybe people will pump the brakes a little bit and learn their lessons from this and say, let's make sure we get all of the information and an appropriate action happens here, which in this case, probably nothing should have happened because, again, we found out that the father knew something about it. But again, I also think that based on what they're saying here, I think Coach Garth should be reinstated as soon as possible, because if he talked to the parent and it was nothing about coming to Nease and there was no recruiting there, it was simply about his business and what he could offer as far as on the college front, I don't see any reason why this should take any longer than to get him back on the field.
I wouldn't think so either. And if we're going to go to that level, you're basically maybe sending a message to coaches, hey, don't do anything outside the school. And I don't think that's fair to the athletes. I don't think that's fair to the coaches. I don't think that's fair to anybody involved, because that's the message you're sending, is that if I'm training a student, that potentially puts me in a position where I'm going to get in trouble regardless of what the relationship is with that student.
Well, Mike, as always, I appreciate you joining me, man, to talk about some interesting happenings and stuff. And I hope all continues to go well for you down there at WZNF on 94.9 FM.
Always a pleasure, Todd.
And I would like to thank Mike for coming on the show this morning, and also remind you to listen to WZNF on 94.9 FM to listen to the Rick and Mike Show. You can catch them also on YouTube under WZNF, and be sure to check them out on X under Football County 1. Once again, I'm the Todd for the 32081 Scoreboard Show, and thank you for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to the 32081. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
I love the show, guys. You're awesome.
Please don't forget to subscribe to the show so you can join us for the next episode.
I never miss an episode. It's the best.
Until next time, take care.